Today I will tell you a story that will make your hearts beat faster and your hair stand on end with fear. This is the story of a virtuous woman who was abandoned by her daughter and son-in-law in an abandoned house, unaware of a hidden secret at the heart of that house. But what happened to that mother? What punishment did God inflict on that daughter and son-in-law? A terrifying torment that will stun you just by hearing it. Be with me until the end of this moving moral story, as its ending will stun everyone. But before we begin, I ask you, my dear ones, to support us by liking this video and writing the word of God in the comments. At a time when the autumn winds were sweeping away the yellow leaves as they sweep away bitter memories, Farida was a woman who built her life on endless love. She was a widow who lost her husband in her youth, but sadness was like a shadow that could never extinguish the light of her hope. It was not for Farida, but she had a daughter named Najjar. Her whole world was Najjar. With her wide eyes and sweet laughter, she was like a flower. Farida used to water it every day with her cracked hands. Life was not easy for Farida. She worked in other people's homes, washing dirty clothes, sweeping the floors, and sometimes bending down in the fields to harvest crops that were not hers. Every night, when her exhausted body lay on a thin mattress, she stared at the ceiling and thought about the future she would build for Najjar. One day, my daughter, you will fly, and I will smile from afar, and I see you flying. These words were like a prayer she repeated every night. The years passed like a river that polishes stones but does not change as a child. Najjar studied, and thanks to the effort she inherited from her mother, she graduated from university and found a prestigious job in a large company where her formal suits made her look like a free bird. When Farida saw her daughter for the first time in her new clothes, her eyes filled with tears. Her fatigue did not go in vain, she whispered while clasping her hands, but happiness was like summer clouds, fleeting and deceiving. Najjar met a young man named Arsh, a wealthy man whose life was full of luxury. He was the richest man from a family that received money like rain. He loved Najjar, but he did not like her poor past. When Najjar spoke about marriage, Farida was happy. My daughter, you deserve the best, she said, and started planning a simple but warm wedding. The wedding was held with laughter and music filling the atmosphere. Farida was standing in a corner in a dress she sewed herself, looking at her daughter who had entered a new world. But what she did not know unique is that this world had no place for her from the beginning. Osh saw Unique's presence as a black dot on a white dress. My mother is kind, but she reminds us of our past, he used to say to Najjar in a quiet but cunning voice. At first, Najjar resisted. She is my mother, Arash. Without her I wouldn't be here. But Arash was skilled at weaving words. Every night when they were in bed he would whisper, now we have our own lives. Where is our privacy? Our house is too small for three. His words were like drops of water piercing rock. Calm but continuous. Gradually Najjar changed. Her face would frown when Farida cooked. Mother, why do you always interfere? She would say, while Arash would smile from afar. Farida felt that something had changed in the atmosphere, like the wind that blows before a storm. She tried to speak less, to be less present, but her heart was breaking. What had she done? She was thinking at night as she looked at an old picture of Najjar in her lap. One evening, while the sun was rolling an orange ball on the horizon, Arash and Najjar sat together. Arash said, Najjar, my friends live in comfort. One of them keeps his mother in his house. You are still attached to your mother like a child. Najjar felt shy. She did not want to appear weak in her husband's eyes. You are right, she whispered. Perhaps it is time. The next morning, Farida was busy in the kitchen when Najjar came with a serious face. Mom, we thought about our lives. It is better that you go to another place, a place where you will be comfortable. Farida raised her eyes as if she could not believe. Are you throwing me out of your house? Her voice was trembling. Najjar turned her face. It is not an accident, Mom. We have an old house in the village, quiet and isolated. Rest there. Farida fell silent. Her heart was broken like shattered glass. She did not know that this rest was a plan to get rid of her. Arsh chose an abandoned house that had been neglected for years, full of dust and forgotten memories. No one would bother her there. Lingar said with a hidden smile when they took her. There the atmosphere was heavy. The house was like a sleeping monster with cracked walls and a ceiling that looked like it might collapse at any moment. Farida entered with her small bag, her eyes filled with tears. "If this makes you happy, I will go, nigger." And Arsh left without a warm goodbye. Farida remained alone in the silence of a house from which emanated the smell of dampness and rot. Days passed and Farida tried to live. She cleaned a small garden, planted flowers, and was remembering the past. One night while the wind was blowing and shaking the windows, Farida heard a sound like a groan coming from underground. Curiosity drove her, so she started searching in the dark basement with the help of a small lamp. She found a fragile wall. When she dug in it, something shone: an old chest full of gold coins and ancient jewels, a treasure hidden for years. Farida was shocked, and Shaida whispered she did not know that this house was owned by a wealthy family that hid its treasure, but she was afraid, so she kept the matter a secret. Maybe it would be useful one day, she thought. In the meantime, Arsh and Anja continued their lives, but without rest. Nijar used to have nightmares at night. She would see her mother's face pleading. Arsh would make fun of it, but he himself would hear voices like whispers in the wind. "This house is empty," Nijar would say, making Arsh angry. "But about you." One day a rumor reached their ears. Someone in the village spoke of a treasure found in the old house. Arsh's eyes lit up. If this was true, Nijar hesitated, but greed pulled her in. They decided to go without knowing what awaited them. Farida was alone in the deserted house, and time had stopped between its cracked walls. The house was like a silent, exhausted creature with broken windows. The autumn winds wailed through them, moving the old curtains like dancing ghosts. The day Farida entered this house, her heart was heavy like a stone drowning in a deep river. She put her small bag on the floor, and dust flew around her like gray snow. She stared at the damp walls and the ceiling, which looked as if it had bent under the weight of the years. "This is my house," she whispered, and her voice faded into the silence of the house. That moment when she entered was still fresh in her mind. When Nijar and Arsh brought her, the sun was setting, and her orange light like light blood spread on the ground. Farida got out of the car with trembling steps. Her eyes filled with tears but her lips closed. Nugger did not look at her and said Arsh with a cold smile, "Here you can rest as you please." When he left, Farida stood by the door listening to the sound of the car engine fading into the distance. Then her knees bent and she sat on the cold ground. Her tears were silent like the rain falling in the desert, and no one sees her hand on it, her chest, and whispered, "My daughter, why am I the one who gave you everything?" The deserted house emanated a scent of dust and rotting wood. The rooms were dark, with shadows creeping in the corners like silent sentinels of a forgotten past. On the first night, Farida lay on a bed with a thin mattress and rustling springs. The winds blew in through the cracks in the windows, and she stared at the ceiling where cobwebs wove a map of her sorrows. Every night when she closed her eyes, she would see Nijar's face, the face that once warmed her heart with his laughter, but now it was cold and indifferent. Farida tried to survive. There was a small garden behind the house, full of weeds and dry dirt. She began to clean it with her chapped hands, as if with each weed she was extracting a part of her pain. She planted wildflowers, and every morning when the pale sun crept through the clouds, she would water them. "You are my only companions," she would say to the flowers, a bitter smile on her lips. But loneliness was like a shadow that never left her. Night fell, and the moon peeked out like a sad eye from behind the clouds. Arash and Nijar got into the car. The dark road ahead of them, a fracture that remained unexplained. The trees on the side of the road were like silent guards, and the wind roared ominously. Nijar clasped her hands together. "Something's wrong, Arash." He laughed, but his laugh was hollow. "Don't carry them tonight, everything will be fixed." When they reached the house, darkness covered it like a heavy blanket. The old wooden door shook under Arash's fist, and when it didn't open, he hit it with his shoulder. The door broke with a loud bang, and dust rose up like angry spirits. Farida was in the back room, her oil lamp burning dimly. When she heard the sound, her heart skipped a beat. "Who?" she whispered and moved towards the door in fear. Ash and Arash entered, their shadows stretching and intertwining on the walls. Arash shouted, Farida, where are you? Farida came out of the room, her eyes full of surprise and fear. What do you want here? Osh said with a cold smile. We heard that you found something, show it to us. Farida stepped back, putting her hand on her heart. There's nothing wrong. Why don't you leave me alone? Nigger stepped forward, her voice trembling. But Egypt, my mother, this isn't good for you. If you have something, give it to us. Farida looked at her daughter, the girl who was once her world. You left me here, and now what do you want? Her voice broke and she cried. She slid down her cheek. Arsh's anger is easy, you know where he ran towards the basement. His instinct leading him into the basement. He found the fragile wall. He removed the bricks with his hands and lit the box. Here he screamed and Najjar joined him, their eyes shining with greed. When he lifted the box, the ground shook, the house was angry. Suddenly a terrifying sound came from the ceiling like the roar of an ancient creature. The bricks and wood collapsed and Arsh and Najjar were trapped. Under the rubble, their screams were lost in the dust, but Farida, who ran towards the door, jumped out and survived. Farida never knew that Arsh and Najjar remained under the rubble. She returned to her garden with tearful eyes. She thought that they had left, but the truth was that the treasure was cursed. The box belonged to a family who had gathered their wealth through greed and injustice years ago, and placed a curse on it that whoever touched it carefully would fall into eternal torment. The fate of Arsh and Najjar was not limited to remaining under the rubble, but the angry spirits of the past besieged them in eternal nightmares where they saw the face of Unique every night, but they could not reach her. Unique sat without knowing their fate in her garden, looking at her flowers and whispering, "O Lord, you are just." She found comfort and her prayer was heard, but in the basement, Arash and Anjar were trapped in darkness and terror. A lesson is that injustice to a mother brings nothing but destruction. Thank you for accompanying me until the end of this story. The lesson is until the next story. I entrust you to God Almighty.